My guest today is David Brooks. He is a cultural commentator for the New York Times and the author of How to Know a Person, The Art of Seeing Others Deeply and Being Deeply Seen. You can find that and all of the books discussed on this program by going to mightyheaton.com/featured. And I am very excited to talk to you, Mr. Brooks. I've been reading you for years and am thrilled you're on the program.
Oh, it's a great pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Well, I'm going to kick it off with a depressing-esque question. About halfway through the book, you have a number of sad statistics about the loneliness in the United States, the disconnectedness in the United States. What do you think is the root cause of that?
Yeah, I mean, the numbers are pretty stark. The number of people who commit suicide every year is rising. The number of people depressed rising. 54% of Americans say that no one knows them well. The number of people without any close personal friends is up by fourfold. And so there's just a lot of sadness. Mm-hmm. And that sadness tends to lean to meanness, because when you see yourself being unheard, invisible, unseen, you regard it as an injustice. You feel unsafe because we evolved to be in a community where people would be looking out for each other. And if you feel nobody's looking out for you, you see threat everywhere and you lash out. And so there are a whole bunch of, I won't bore you with them, a bunch of statistics showing meanness, rising hate crimes, rising gun violence. I have a friend who's a nurse, and she says her main challenge is keeping staff, because the patients have become so abusive that nurses burn out and want to leave the profession. Really? And so that's just a basic social breakdown that makes us sad and mean. And I could tell a bunch of stories about why this is happening. The most obvious is the social media story, that social media is driving us all crazy. The second one, I suppose, would be a sociological story. We're less active in civic organizations, so we're more isolated and cut off from each other. You could tell an economic story. We live wildly different, unequal lives. The story I focus on is about skills. It's about moral and social skills that we haven't been taught for a couple generations now, how to treat each other with kindness and consideration in the normal circumstances of life. Like, how do you listen well? How do you ask somebody out on a date? How do you develop a friendship? How do you ask for and offer forgiveness? How do you break up with somebody without crushing their heart? How do you offer criticism at work in a way that's caring? How do you host a dinner party so everybody feels included? In my view, these are skills that can be taught just as much as carpentry can be taught, or tennis or anything. And somehow we just haven't done it. And so many of us are incompetent at treating each other with consideration, kindness, and respect. And so the book just walks people through the various stages of getting to know somebody, with hopefully practical advice on how to do it.
Which it certainly has quite a lot of. I'm always, at least on this program, leaning towards the big picture society stuff. But I will note your book is very full of chapter by chapter advice on how to facilitate interpersonal relationships. In terms of what we could do to develop the skill in the United States, is that something that you would like secondary and primary schooling to focus on? Is it a thing where we just need more supplementary literature from authors such as yourself? Like, what would be the best case scenario in terms of developing these skills?
Yeah, I think all of the above. When our founders founded this country, they looked at human nature and they saw human beings who were sometimes wonderfully cooperative and sometimes completely selfish. And so they said, if we're going to build a democracy out of these people, we have to do what they called moral formation. We have to form them into better versions of themselves. And there's a great Ted Lasso line when he's asked in the show as a soccer coach, what's your goal for your team this year? He says, I just want to make the fellows on the team better versions of themselves on and off the field. And that's moral formation. And so it sounds pompous, the phrase, but it really comes down to three things. The first is helping people resist their selfishness, some self-control here. Second, to find an ideal which you can direct your life to, some purpose and meaning in your life. And third, it is these social skills. And so if you looked in American history, you see first schools decided for most of American history, their first job was to inculcate character in their students. It's not to get them into Harvard or Stanford. It was to inculcate character. It's not to prepare them for jobs. And so there was a headmaster at a school who said, my job is to produce students who are acceptable at a dance, invaluable at a shipwreck. And so those people who would come through when you needed. And the schools, we wouldn't want to go back to the character forming methods they used back in the 19th century. But they had like a courtesy club, how to be polite to people. They had Thrift Club, how to save money. They had these McGuffey readers, which told you how to be a moral person, how not to lie, steal, and cheat. And they came from the left side of the political spectrum, the right side, the religious side, the secular side. There was just moral formative institutions everywhere in the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, the unions, the environmental movement with the land ethic of how we have to treat the land. And they sort of went away after World War II. And so, in my view, we have produced several generations, of which I'm one. We're not bad people, but we're morally inarticulate, and we lack some of the basic skills to be considerate.
And the pivot point presumably would be the schooling system went to a hyper careerist model of the point of school is to prepare you for jobs in the future and going up the socioeconomic ladder.
Yeah, I think two things happened. One, the meritocracy got purified, so it became super competitive. So everyone's obsessed with using school to get a career. I teach college. I've been teaching on and off for like 25 years. And just once I'd like one of my students to say, I really want to major in accounting, but my parents are forcing me to major in French poetry. Like, that'll never happen. The parents are always pressuring their kids to go hyper-professional. The second thing that happened is after World War II, we had a new sort of positive psychology movement come on the scene, led by one of the people was a guy named Carl Rogers, who was the father of the self-esteem movement. And he argued that people aren't bad, people are generally good. And so they don't need moral formation. They're little angels inside. They just need to actualize, self-actualize. So a lot of the character formation, here's how you can get better, it turned into self-actualization. Here's how you can do you. And if you think you're perfect, you don't need to improve. And so that happened. And then I think we just became a much more individualistic culture. And we put a lot more emphasis on individual happiness and individual ascent, and got a little less concerned with how to do relationship.
I might be splitting hairs terminologically, but it seems to me that if we went to we went to curriculum designers in schooling and we said the curriculum ought to be more broadly life-focused, life skills and interpersonal relationship, and have education include that would make sense. I think if you just told skills focus on character now, it would become a big culture war. Character means owning your privilege, et cetera, et cetera. I would be very hesitant to tell schools to do that.
Yeah, although I would say this. First, of course, you can imagine how it would turn into a culture war. And if we turn character formation into a specific vision of what a man should look like or what a woman should look like, I imagine that'll get you into all sorts of trouble and lead nowhere. But when I think of character formation, I'm not thinking of some big moral system. I'm not thinking of religion. I'm just thinking you detect anxiety in somebody's voice. How do you make them feel included? You break up with someone, you don't ghost them. One of my students, she said she had 3 or 4 boyfriends in her life, and all of them had ghosted her at the end. And so the next time she had a boyfriend, she's filled with distrust. She assumes he's going to ghost her. He's just going to vanish on her, won't be considerate, and have a conversation, say, I'm sorry, this is not working out. And so in my view, the skills we need to work on are so basic that they're underneath the big culture wars we have over LGBTQ or abortion or anything else. This is just basic rules of how to be a decent neighbor. And
Right.
so I think the schools can teach that without getting into ideological trouble.
I think that's possible, and I think part of it would be terminological. Like I did debate when I was in high school, which
Yeah, me too.
very much suited my temperament, but I think is a wonderful skill set in that it rapidly teaches you to be able to distinguish between the case the person is making and whether or not you like the person. They were assigned the case; it's not their fault. So
Right.
you have to begin to separate opinion from personality in a way that I think is radically atrophied in the United States. So something like that I think would be very beneficial.
That is helpful. And, chess, a lot of the teachers who teach these skills never mention the skills. But if you're a chess coach, you teach kids how to be calm in crisis, how to handle pressure, how to be a good teammate to somebody who's just lost. And you don't have to say, I'm teaching you social skills. You just say, here's how we're going to do things on the chess team. And I was on debate, too. The only thing I learned in debate is how to read index cards really quickly.
Oh, so you were a cross-ex guy. Yeah.
I don't know why we didn't talk like normal human beings, but we didn't.
Yeah. You talked like you were doing an auction. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did cross-ex for a bit. Well, one of the stats that you have in the book that made my eyes bulge out were hold on, I'll find this one. According to research by Ryan Streeter of the American Enterprise Institute, lonely people are 7 times more likely than non-lonely people to say they are active in politics. I read that and went, "Oh my God, the last 10 years makes so much sense to me now."
No kidding.
People are becoming angry and political as kind of an ersatz community, I think.
Yeah, I think people have begun to use politics as a form of therapy. And so they feel lonely. And so they think, well, I can join a tribe. I'll join the red tribe or the blue tribe, and suddenly I'll be part of a community. And plus, I get to do morally good stuff for the country. I get to feel indignant. And I have a moral landscape. There's good, innocent people like me over here, and there's bad, evil people like that over there. And of course, you don't really get community. You're not really like sitting around a town hall having jokes. You're just hating the same people. You're not really doing moral action. You're not sitting with a widow or feeding the hungry. You're just being indignant at your television set. And the line of morality, as Solzhenitsyn said, runs down every human heart. Good and evil does not run between tribes. And so it's a form of therapy that, in my view, is highly unsuccessful. The therapists have a phrase that I've heard: the hardest thing to cure is the patient's attempt to self-cure. And so patients are constantly doing things they think will make it better. I'll do a lot of drugs, that'll help. And in this case, people are saying, I'll become addicted to politics, that'll help me. But it just winds them in a culture war, and it just becomes nasty.
I couldn't agree more. I think that is a major part of the current rancor that the country is going through. To jump a little bit forward in your book, you say, healthy societies produce the politics of distribution. How should that resource of the society be allocated? Unhappy societies produce the politics of recognition. I feel like something profound is being reached here, but I want you to explain it to me.
Yeah, the politics of recognition is see me, and I want to make you feel ashamed. I celebrate my victory when you feel shame and I feel admiration. And so what does Donald Trump do, basically? He tells 70 million Americans, those people on the coast, they don't see you, they don't respect you. But I see you, and I am your retribution, I am your revenge. We're going to take those people down. And so basically, he's not offering them much in the way of physical or economic benefits. He's offering them recognition. And if there's one thing humans need, it's we need to be recognized. Babies come out of the womb looking for a face to see. Even before they need food and liquid, they need a face to see because they can't get food and liquid unless mom's face is right there. And so there's these things called still face experiments where they tell moms with little infants, your baby's going to bid for attention. Don't respond. Just be still face. And within the 10 seconds, the babies are in agony because they need recognition. And I don't think it would change as much as we're adults. If we feel invisible, then nobody gets us. We'll hunger for anybody who can say, I get you, I get you, I get you. And that's Donald Trump's. And that's basically every demagogue. That's their skill. I get you, I see you.
The political discourse becomes emotional validation for my team and the shaming of the other team. Yeah. And that is the conversation that we enter, as opposed to how do we get more parking spaces? How can we best optimize the system? It ends up not being proceduralist and problem solving, but validatory.
And because of the loneliness, the people are feeling a great sense of self-doubt because they're without friends, they're without recognition. And so I think they just need somebody to make them feel admired. So there's something deeply psychological going on here.
Okay, so we can kind of make a through line here that politics is in large part becoming horrible because there's an epidemic of loneliness, that demagogues can capitalize on this. To jump even further ahead, as AI becomes more important in society, do you think that is going to obviate the needs for these interpersonal skills, or it's going to necessitate them further?
Well, I think the first thing AI is going to do is going to give us a lot of false friends. And so you're going to have what Pi was one of the personal bots. And you can have a conversation with that thing, and it'll seem superficially interesting, but it's not a real relationship, and it's not really. It's going to make you worse a relationship because the bot is always going to be there for you. The bot is never going to be impatient. The bot was never going to have his own desires or motivations. But my hope on AI, and I tend to be more hopeful than most people, is that AI will reveal to us what it means to be human by revealing what it can't do. And so it'll be really good at working memory. It's really good at synthesizing large amounts of information. But it's not good at planning. It's not good at understanding another person. It's not good at telling stories. And in my view, the things that make us precious are not the things that can be measured by our IQ. The things that make us precious are the intelligence of our emotions, as we have apt or inapt emotional responses to things, or our moral motivation or desire to be good people and to do some good in the world. And so my hope is that AI will handle a lot of the mental drudgery and allow us to be even more human versions of ourselves. And my belief is that this metaphor we've been telling since the 1950s, that the brain is a computer, we'll put that away, because the brain is not a computer. It does not work like a computer. It does not think like a computer. Let computers be computers, and we'll be humans.
Yeah, I think that the metaphors we use to understand how we think are almost lockstep with whatever the current technological development is. So if
Yeah.
you go back to the Industrial Revolution and you read about how they viewed people, there's like levers and
Right.
they've like fuel and things like that. And then we got into the digital age and we went, brains are basically computers. And yes, they're not computers. They're
Yeah.
they're very complex. And you point out in the book that there's this 3,000-year fetishization of rationalism and reason, and I'm a big fan of both, but that they sort of this false duality or dichotomy that emotions are kind of a dumb animalistic thing that reason squelches in a developed individual, and you're like, nope, that's not an accurate way to look at it.
Yeah. And if you go back to the Middle Ages, people thought that the brain was a clock because they just invented clocks. So they thought, oh, got a bunch of gears in there. It's like a clock. But, one of the great failures of the Enlightenment was Descartes' notion that reason can be separate from emotion. And David Hume, the Scottish philosopher, said, no, that's not true. That's not true. He said reason is and ought to be slave to the passions. So the passions, if your emotional sentiments are well trained by being in the right community, writing the right books, knowing the right people, your emotions are very smart. And so, Antonio Damasio was a neuroscientist, a very famous neuroscientist. And he studied people who had lesions on their brain, so they couldn't experience emotion. They just didn't feel anything. And they didn't turn out to be super smart Mr. Spocks. Their lives deteriorated because they couldn't make a decision, because emotions are the way you value things. This thing's good for me, this thing's bad for me. And if you have no way to assign value to anything, you can't make any decisions. And so these people's lives were just like random. And they couldn't make good decisions, and they spiraled because they lacked emotions.
Well, getting back to the skill set that is interpersonal communications, you, I think rightly in your book, emphasize that if we're going to get to know somebody at an intimate level, we have to know them as an individual rather than as a component of a label, which makes sense to me. At the same time, though, I find being able to plug people into schemas, you're an extrovert, you're an introvert. I do a lot of political media, so you're a progressive or you're a libertarian, is very useful for me in terms of how I can communicate. So how do I balance this having a helpful mental model versus being able to understand somebody as a sui
Yeah.
generis individual?
Right. So I think we want to see people at different levels at once, and that's the trick. We want to see them in part of their group. So if you're a sommelier, you know that some wines have greater minerality than others or greater tannin. And it's helpful to have those concepts in your head. And so if I meet somebody who's conscientious and who seems very organized, self-controlled, they show up for all their gym appointments, I think, oh, that person's probably pretty conscientious. I know something about them. But they could be a conscientious nun or a conscientious Nazi. So I don't know everything there is to know about them. So I think to see someone, you have to see the unique person they are, that they'll never be repeated. You have to see what group they're a part of, whether it's an ethnic group like being Irish or being black, and then you have to see their social location. Are they part of a group that's historically favored or historically marginalized? Are they going to feel that the whole society is organized around me? Or when they walk into a room, do they have to think, well, what version of myself can I bring into this room? And so you've got to be able to see people on all three levels at once, as an individual, as a member of a group, and as a person with a social location. And if you can get those three things at once, you're on your way to seeing them better. But, the subtitle of the book is Seeing Others Deeply and Being Deeply Seen. And I chose that subtitle because it makes the point clear. But in truth, it should have been Hearing Others Deeply and Being Deeply Heard, because it's about the skill of conversation and listening and asking good questions. One of the things we've learned from research is that I can't imagine what's going on in your head. You and I are too different. And that's true even of members of our immediate family. We're just too different. We see the world too differently. And so if I want to understand what you're thinking, I have to ask you. And I have to get really good at conversation so I can see the world a bit from your point of view.
Um, Great. Then I would love to plumb you for advice on how to do all of this. Let's say that there are people listening to the show that are um, they feel clunky and they feel awkward when they're interacting with people. Their heart's in the right place. They're nice, but they feel like they're making missteps, and as a result, they are worried to engage and kind of pull back. What advice would you give them in terms of just being able to develop these connections?
The first is be not afraid. That you think, oh, I'm going to say the wrong thing, it'll be awkward. But, I've been asking people questions I'm sure you have for 40 years as a journalist. How many times have somebody said to me, none of your damn business when I ask them a question? Almost never. If you
Yeah.
ask respectfully about somebody's life, they're dying to tell you their story because no one has ever asked them. So I'll, even on a stranger at a bar, on a train or whatever, I'll ask, where'd you grow up? And then get them talking about their childhood. People love to talk about their childhood. And then I may ask, like, where'd you get your name? Then that suddenly they're telling me about their ethnic background. And then, I may ask something sort of silly, like, what's your favorite unimportant thing about you? And so I asked that question of a theologian. It turns out his favorite unimportant thing is he watches a ton of trashy reality TV. So I got a little glimpse into his life. And then as you get to know the person, you get some trust established, you can ask bigger questions. And those are questions that lift people above the daily rut of life, and you can see yourself from 30,000 feet. So if this 5 years is a chapter in your life, what's the chapter about? What would you do if you weren't afraid? What role does fear play in your life? How do your ancestors show up in your life? You probably have some ancestry going back to some ethnic heritage. How are you shaped by that? And the good thing about all these questions is very few people have ready answers for it. You have to go on a journey of exploration. And a good conversation is not two people making statements at each other. That's a bad conversation. It's two people like, oh, well, I'm curious about this. Let's go on a journey together to understand better. And that's fun. You're having fun then.
Well, and one tip, and again, I want to emphasize that while I am immediately gravitating towards like big picture Robert Putnam style questions with Mr. Brooks, the book is 80 to 90% a manual on how to have good conversations. So it's for anybody that is wanting to delve, it's worth it. One of the things I got out of the book, and by all accounts, I'm pretty good at interacting with people, is questions which would either intentionally for you or might appear to be trying to size the other person up are not great
Yeah.
questions. So, like asking somebody where they're from, that's okay because that's biographical, and the person can talk about like, I'm from Wisconsin and I loved it, but I had to move to the big city. But they can do all of that. Whereas, what do you do for a living? What neighborhood are you in? What school did you go to? Those are all where do you stack up type questions, and they're
Yeah.
also perfunctory. Just give me a statement as opposed to give me a story.
Yeah, and I find every city I go to has its own question. And so in D.C., where I live, people ask, "What do you do?" They're naked about it. What job? How powerful are you? They're
Yeah,
basically
yeah, yeah.
asking. But if you go to Seattle, they may say, "What do you do?" But they mean, "Are you a kayaker or are you a mountain climber?" Like that. What's your hobby? And then some towns like Kansas City, it's like, "What high school did you go to?" Because then they can tell what neighborhood you came from, and they know something
Right,
about
right,
you.
yeah.
In New Orleans, I ran somebody who said, my question is always who was your mama? I knew who your dad was because I know your last name, but I want to know who your mama was. So tell me who your mom was. And so, but either way, I mean, if you ask it nice enough, it doesn't matter. But those evaluative questions are like everyone gets suspicious. The more fun
Yeah.
questions are storytelling conversations.
Can
And
I?
so I no longer ask people, I mean, you do political stuff. I no longer ask people, what do you think about this? I ask, how'd you come to believe this?
Mm.
And then suddenly they're telling me a story about some episode in their life or some person who shaped their values. And it's much more interesting than just what's your opinion.
Can I give you a funny DC? What do you do for a living story?
Sure,
That
sure.
I used to live in DC and I spent a lot of time in DC. And you go to like this sounds really pretentious, and I suppose it is, but you go to like a gala or something. There's some think tank that throws the CEI dinner or something like that. And I was at one of these a few years ago, and I refused to ask people what they do for a living because my perspective is if you are very excited about your job and you want to talk about your job, I would love to talk to you about it. But if you're not excited about it, I don't want to talk about it. So I was waiting in line getting cocktails, and a lady went, so what do you do? And I went, can I be honest with you? I don't care about this. Can I ask you a different question? And she went, okay. And I went, what do you think about ghosts? And she stood there for a second, and she went, "Ghosts?" And I went, "Yeah, I don't care what you do. And unless you really are excited, I don't care. What do you think about ghosts?" And she paused and she went, "I fucking hate ghosts." And I was like, "Great. Now we have a really good conversation. Now we can talk about, like, why do you hate ghosts? This is so much more interesting to me than
Right.
than where you work."
Yeah, that is a brilliant
Can I
idea. I mentioned in the book that these Sunday morning shows, Meet the Press, Face the Nation, instead of asking gotcha questions, they should ask the guest, "Why'd you get into this? Why you?" And it would just be more interesting. They should ask, "What do you think about ghosts?" That'd be better.
So okay, I'll give you a question. This is for my benefit here. Um, I sometimes feel that when I'm meeting people for the first time, I can go one of two different routes. I can go for lack of a better term, being charming, or I can go for intimacy. And what I mean by this is, I used to ask people when I would get to know them, if you go back to go back to yourself in high school and give yourself some advice, what advice would you give them?
Yeah.
And it's a good question, but what I realized was that it's basically a way of phrasing, what do you regret about high school? And while I was getting them to think about that and have an intimate moment, I was also setting the emotional flavor of our relationship as one of being retrospective and being kind of depressing. And I went, well, that's kind of like phase 2, phase 3 type stuff when we're at the kitchen later in the evening. So how do you adjudicate that developing warm feelings with somebody when you first meet them versus the raw trouble of your past that develops intimacy?
Yeah. So I would put it this way: when you give a speech, it's always best to lead with some jokes, and to lead with an upbeat emotion. And that says two things: one, we're going to have fun together. You can trust me. But B, when you're giving a speech or when you're just meeting somebody in conversation, everybody is secretly anxious. Does this guy suck? And will this just be awful? And
Hmm.
if you have some jokes, you have some fun together, then everybody can relax. Okay, this is not going to suck. And I do think that there's a quote I have in the book from D.H. Lawrence that getting to know somebody is like approaching a deer in the forest. You have to be slow. You have to be patient. Any act of excessive willfulness will just scare people away. And so, I had some interns at an organization I was running who wanted to do a public media campaign, end small talk. And I was like, I kind of like small talk. I mean, you have to feel comfortable with somebody before you really can go deep. And so if we're going to talk about the Cowboys game, the weather, I'm fine with that, because the body has to trust before the mind can really engage. So I hadn't thought about that exact problem, but my instinct is to lead with something light and happy, and then get to the more serious stuff later on.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So it could be a pacing thing, which is kind of how I'm treating it now. Where if I'm meeting somebody at a party, if it's going to be a 3 hour party and we hit it off, maybe at some point we go off to the corner and I go, "Hey, can
Yeah,
I ask you like something like that?" Okay.
right. And it
But
always
it's
has
sort
to
of
be
a pacing thing.
reciprocal. In order to behold someone, you have to be willing to be beheld. I was once around a campfire with a journalist who I didn't know but I really admired, and she just peppered me with questions, one after another, without any comment about her own life. And I felt like I was being grilled, and of course, all
Yeah.
my walls went up.
Yeah, that's okay. That's another problem that I sometimes have is that I'll go one of two extremes. If I'm in a particularly boisterous and self-absorbed mood, I love talking about myself. Then after a few minutes, I'll be like, I'm being a narcissist. I'm not asking.
Yeah.
But then I'll go the other side sometimes and be like, wonder how long I can go without talking about myself and
Yeah.
just ask questions. And both of those are probably unpleasant for the person that's experiencing them.
Yeah. I found that I'll sometimes leave a party and think that whole time nobody asked me a question. And I've come to conclude that only like 30 or 40% of Americans are question askers. The rest are nice people. They just don't ask questions. And this has sometimes helped me out in my job as a political journalist, because I'll be talking to somebody who's very supportive of Donald Trump. And while I'm having the conversation, I'm always worried, okay, are they going to ask me where I work? And if they ask me, where do you work? And I say New York Times, the conversation is going to go sideways pretty fast. And so, but fortunately, they almost never ask me where I work.
Have you developed, I don't want to say tricks, but have you developed best practices for that? So, for example, you're on a show called The Political Orphanage. The first couple of years I did it, I hated telling people what I did for a living because when I
Mm.
said I host a podcast on politics, they would immediately go, "Oh, I hate blank." And they wanted to bond with me through hatred, which I don't like doing. And now, just reflexively, I say, I host the Political Orphanage, so called because it's a show for people that are tired of red team versus blue team stuff. And 99% of people go, "Oh, thank God," right? But me framing it I want to avoid dumb conversations, and I want to avoid like reactive anger. Are there things that you've learned that can sort of frame the conversation in a productive manner and in a kind manner, as opposed to just immediately squaring off with "we're on enemy teams"?
Mostly, I almost never ask about politics first. And so I'll
Yeah.
ask about what was your best job, or how's the economy where you are. As I say, I'll ask who were you in high school and how has that changed. And so once you get the human out there, and I tell this story. I don't think I put in the book. I can't remember now. I met a guy years ago who was a big Trump supporter, and he said, "Let me tell you about the best day of my life. I was working at a plant. I was a foreman for a little section of the plant that made refrigeration stuff, and they laid me off because we had new technology I was not skilled at. And so I thought I'd just like slink away without making a fuss. And so I put all my stuff in my office in a little box. I opened the door and I was going to just go out to my car. And he was going to slink out he put his stuff in the box. He was just going to go out to the car. And when he opened the office door, there were 3,600 people. Everybody worked at the plant, and they had formed a double line. And he walked through the line as they applauded him all the way from his office door to his car door in the parking lot. And he said, that was the best day of my life. And every day since then has been worse. My jobs have been worse. My economic situation is worse. I'm every day looking after my mother-in-law. And so that guy, Trump, may be a jackass, but I need to change. And so for me, that's like, okay, I may not agree with you, but I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, I find when I talk to people that if I can intuit their intentions, I'm usually okay with them, because very very rarely do I find that people's intentions are, there's this one group of people I want them to be impoverished and suffer. That's very rare. It's usually we're arguing about kind of I prioritize individual rights slightly more than equality, and you go the other way, and we're really sort of arguing about values we both share, but just what the priority is. In your case, you're a New York Times columnist and a Republican or a conservative, I believe, unless you've changed your registration in the last few years.
Yeah.
So you can kind of get it from both sides, where if you're hanging out with progressives, you're a Republican, but if you're hanging out with Republicans in Middle America, you're a coastal elitist. Have you just developed a thick skin? Have you developed some sort of internal ninja move to separate your ego from comments? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, I definitely, after my first 6 months on the job, I've been doing this for 20 years. So after my first 6 months in 2003 and 4, they used to put the email on the bottom of my column. And so I cleaned out the email file, and there were 290,000 emails. And the core message was Paul Krugman, who's way left than me. He's great, you suck. And so I just had to develop a thicker skin. But I must say, I sort of hid from the comments because they were too psychologically effective and devastating me. So I made my assistant read them. Then he got depressed. And so you can only take the comments in the right dosage. But my skin has gotten a lot thicker. And the power of a label is really instructive to me, because when I was hired, I supported George W. Bush and all that stuff. And I sort of began to feel a political orphan probably around 2006. A lot of the Gingrich stuff and a lot of the Tom DeLay stuff. People remember that era of the Republican Party, which just wasn't for me. And I began to feel that the economy was not working for people. That I used to think the core economic problem was stagnation. Our societies were stagnating. And so I thought we needed Reagan and Thatcher to fix that problem. Now I think our core economic problem is that lots of people are being left behind. And so now I think Joe Biden's probably pretty good to fit that problem. That doesn't mean I become a Democrat. I'm sort of an orphan. And my phrase is, I got it from a philosopher named Isaiah Berlin, I'm happy to be at the rightward edge of the leftward tendency. And so I'm probably on the leftward tendency these days, but I'm on the rightward edge of it. And I have learned that if you want to make the left really mad at you, don't be a conservative, be a moderate. Then they'll get really mad.
That resonates with me. I think I could be one of the Rockefeller Republicans currently being bred in captivity in secret installations on the East Coast, or I could be like a Jared Polis style neoliberal Democrat. Like, but I'd be on the edge. If I were to go with a political party, I'd be on like the minority edge of either one of those. Um, so on that note, and apologies for making this about me, I was very informed by Milton Friedman and P.J. O'Rourke when I had my political awakening, and have been accused, rightly probably, by several people of being a market rationalist. Are there any thinkers or books you'd recommend for me to kind of challenge some of my priors?
Oh, that's a good question. I, of course, Friedman was a mentor to me. I did a TV show with him when I was 21 years old, and he took me out to dinner for a week and gave me little lessons in free market economics, which I never had.
Uh-huh.
My other hero is Edmund Burke. So the book that really transformed my life was called Reflections, Revolution in France by Edmund Burke, an Irish scholar and statesman. And the core message of that book is that the world's really complicated, and so we should really be careful of what we can know. And so we should do change, and it should be constant, but it should be incremental, because we just don't know enough to try to transform the world all at once. And so he became a hero of mine. And another hero of mine was Alexander Hamilton, who's a Puerto Rican hip-hop star from the Heights.
Right, yeah.
But if some liberals believe in using government to enhance equality, and more free market people believes in limited government to enhance freedom, Hamilton stood for a political tradition that believes in limited but energetic government to enhance social mobility. So use government to give poor boys and girls like him a chance to rise and become good capitalists. And so that tradition leads to the Whig Party, Daniel Webster and Henry Clay. Then it leads to Abraham Lincoln, and then maybe Teddy Roosevelt. And now there are like 6 of us left, but I'm a Whig. So I don't know if the history of the Whig Party may be interesting to you.
Okay, so then if I am carrying the banner of the Milton Friedman market rationalists, perhaps I should read some literature on social mobility, either starting with Hamilton or just social mobility today. That might be a good antidote to whatever priors I've
all
got.
the vast body of literature from Danny Kahneman on down on how we're not purely rationalists and we're not mostly rational. We have a lot of biases and heuristics in our brain that means we're not rational, but we're also mostly desiring creatures, and we're mostly emotional creatures in my view, and reason follows the emotions. And so to me, studying all the books on psychology suggests we're not coolly predicting how to optimize every situation.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense to me. All right, I'll bring it back to the book at interpersonal relationships. The book is predominantly focused on one-on-one relationships, but I'm curious in your life. You're in D.C., but you're traveling around the country. You've done a bunch of things. You clearly have a very large Rolodex of people in your life. How do you allocate your time in order to maintain a healthy relationship with the people closest to you, while also just maintaining the wide
welcome to
circles
the
you
main
travel
problem
on?
in my life. And so this genuinely is one of the main problems, and I'm fortunate to have this as a problem. But, I think my job and the world wants me to be a national, to travel around, to report. Like I'm in New Mexico now. I visit like 35, 40 states a year. I'm on a plane several times every week. And it's because I'm reporting this story here, or I'm interviewing that person there, I'm giving a talk there. And so the danger is that you're meeting cool people in every city you go to, but you have no depth. And I had depth in where I live in D.C. With a group of people, especially a group of young people who we formed around 2017 or 16. We formed sort of a chosen family. And so it was 40 adolescents from D.C. who had issues with some of their parents. The situation wasn't great at home with them. And there were about 8 or 10 of us adults. And so it was one group aged like 17 to 22, and then a bunch of us in our 40s and 50s. And we had dinner every Thursday night together. We did vacation together. We did holidays together. And it was really a chosen family, and I really felt anchored in D.C. in the way I hadn't felt before. But the kids grew up, and COVID happened, and they dispersed across the country. So my wife and I talk about this all the time, the need for anchoring roots where we are. And for all the internet can do, we still need place. And so, but committing to a place means saying no to all the other things, the travel you're going to do. So it is genuinely a tension, I think, in a lot of people's lives, but in my life.
Well, a couple more questions, then I'll let you go. You spend a chapter in the book talking about depression. A good friend of mine, very likely listening to the show, suffers from depression. How can I and people listening be better friends to people that
Well,
suffer
first,
from
don't make
depression?
the two mistakes I made, which was the first one was I tried to give him ideas of how to get out of depression. So, he
That's my immediate desire is I will make
right.
actionable steps that you could take in your life to make you feel better. Which, yeah, that my tendency to want to make a graph to solve problems when
Right.
people have emotional
Yeah.
issues just never
And,
worked
I
out
learned
in
if
my
you do that, you're
experience.
just showing you don't get it because it's not ideas they're lacking. It's energy. It's a lot of other things, not ideas. The second mistake I made was what they call positive reframing, which is to say, I would say, look at all the wonderful things in your life. You should cheer up. You've got a great job. You love your wife. Your kids are awesome. And that's just reminding the person that they're not enjoying the things that are palpably enjoyable, and you're making them feel worse. So the few things you can do, and there may not be much. I mean, I learned the hard way that the futility of words, like we spend our lives with words, but sometimes in some circumstances, words are not going to do much for you. But one, you can acknowledge the reality of the situation and just say, this sucks. This sucks. I want to know about it. I want to know exactly what you're going through. Tell me, describe to me what it feels like right today. And two, just a burst of goodwill. I want more for you. I just want more for you. And it may not do anything, but you're just saying, I want more for you. Three, by constant touches, little texts or whatever, I'm not going anywhere. You're not going to be alone in this. I'm not going anywhere. And then finally, I learned this from Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning when he was confront people who were contemplating suicide. He would say, life has not stopped expecting things of you. That there's still a lot of good in the world you can do, and you need to stick around to do that. And because of what you've been through, you have credibility with others who are going through hard times. And there's a great Thornton Wilder voice with, it's your very pain that makes your low voice tremble in the hearts of men. That in love's service, only wounded soldiers can serve. So the fact that you've endured this pain and endured it with such courage gives you credibility with other people who are going through it, and there's a lot of good you can do in the world.
We'll wrap up here in a minute, although I do want to leave on a high note. Basic question for you. You make a delineation in your book between the official conversation that people are having and the actual conversation that people are having. What
I
is the
learned this
difference
from a
between
book
these?
called Crucial Conversations, which I highly recommend. The official conversation is what we're nominally talking about, whether it's politics or what we're going to do for vacation. The actual conversation is the flow of emotions that are occurring between us. And so with everything I say, I'm either making you feel respected or less respected, safer or unsafe. And that under conversation is more important than whatever we're putatively talking to each other. And so that's one of the things. If you come at me with a critique, my first job, my first instinct is get all defensive and say, hey, I'm not the problem here. You don't understand. But the right thing to do is to stand in their standpoint. It's to ask 3 or 4 times, tell me more about that. What am I missing here? And I may not be persuaded by what you say, but at least I'll show you the curiosity of respect. And this book in Crucial Conversations, they say in any conversation, respect is like air. When it's present, nobody notices. And when it's absent, it's all anybody can think about. And so we have to be curious about each other just to keep that volley of respect going back and forth.
Okay, and then final question, just in general, any parting advice on how people can better connect with folks they meet?
Yeah, I'll say the one thing
now?
that's in the book that resonated with people, I thought it was just another thing, but the one thing that a lot of people have brought up to me is the conversational tip in there, I put in there, don't be a topper. If you're telling me you're having trouble with your teenage kid, and I say, oh, I know what you're going through, I'm having trouble with my Tommy, it sounds like I'm just trying to relate to you, but what I'm really doing is saying, let's not talk about you, let's talk about me. And so this is something I'm guilty of all the time, and I think a lot of people are guilty of it, so don't be a topper.
Yeah, I think, there is that natural tendency to go, oh, you did that? Well, you were on the tarmac for 2 hours. Did I tell you about last year when I was on the tarmac 4.5, and this was July, mind you, and like the person was wanting to communicate, I just went through this thing I want to talk to you about, and you're going, but it's
Right.
nothing compared
Right,
to the
exactly.
travails of my life. Yeah, I think that's a very good actionable step of the book. Yeah. Wonderful. Mr. Brooks, I am a fan. It was a pleasure to meet you, and I'm very grateful you came on the show. Once again, your book is How to Know a Person, The Art of Seeing Others Deeply and Being Deeply
Thank you. I
Seen.
really enjoyed
Thank
our
you so much.
conversation.
And if you